I bought the headphones because the city was becoming too loud. It wasn't just the traffic and sirens. It was the noise that seeped through the walls of my old building, my neighbor's television, the plumbing that groaned like a dying animal, and the bass from a car parked 2 streets away. I work from home as an audio transcriptionist, so silence isn't just something I prefer. I need it. I found a pair of used Orasonic 700s online for about $150. The reviews claimed they could provide perfect, absolute silence. When they arrived, I charged them, put them on, and flipped the switch for the active noise cancellation. The world just stopped. It was beautiful. For the first 2 days, they became my escape. But on the third night, I heard the counting. I was working late, around 2 in the morning, with no audio playing, just the noise cancellation engaged. It was faint, barely there. A dry female voice whispered in my right ear. 1, 2, 3. It was so soft I thought I was imagining it. My brain was just filling the void. I took the headphones off. Silence. I put them back on. The voice was still there, picking up where it left off. 4, 5. I checked my computer and my phone. No audio sources were active. The sound came from the headphones themselves. I guessed it was a glitch, some strange feedback loop. I turned them off and on again. The counting began again. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was unsettling, but I was tired, so I told myself it was just a weird defect in a used piece of electronics. I placed them on the charger and went to bed, the memory of that slow, deliberate count echoing in my head. The next day I couldn't stop thinking about it. I put them on again while sitting on my couch in the afternoon. The sun streamed through the window, the room was bright, and the idea of anything sinister seemed ridiculous. But as soon as the noise cancellation kicked in, there it was. It hadn't started from 1, it picked up from where I'd left off the night before. I remembered the last number I heard was 4. Now the voice was whispering 5, 6, 7. It counted methodically, with about 3 seconds between each number. It never faltered or changed in tone or volume. It was the most neutral, dispassionate sound I'd ever heard. I spent an hour trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a diagnostic tool I couldn't turn off. Maybe it was picking up a stray radio signal, though that seemed unlikely for noise-canceling headphones. I wore them for hours that day, just listening. The numbers climbed into the hundreds. It was somewhat hypnotic, like listening to a metronome. I timed it. The count was consistent, 20 numbers per minute, 1,200 per hour, a little over 28,000 numbers a day. What bothered me most was the sheer consistency. It wasn't random, it was a process. By the time I went to bed, the count was well past 7,000. I felt a strange, compulsive need to know how high it would go. I felt like I was monitoring something important, even though I had no idea what it was. I fell asleep with the headphones on my nightstand, the power light a tiny blue eye in the darkness. A week passed like this. My life developed a new, secret rhythm measured by the whisper in my ears. When I put the headphones on, the count would have advanced by thousands. It passed 100,000 and then 200,000. The number itself felt meaningless, but the act of counting felt heavy with purpose. Then on a Tuesday, I think it was October 10th, the counting stopped. I had them on while making coffee. The voice reached 281,942. Then it went silent, not the usual pause but a complete stop. The sudden absence of the rhythm was more jarring than its presence had been. I stood in my kitchen, holding my breath. After about 30 seconds of this unsettling quiet, the voice returned. But it wasn't a number, it was a name. It whispered, Jasper. My blood ran cold. Jasper was my cat, and he was sleeping on the armchair in the living room. The voice was as flat and emotionless as ever. I ripped the headphones off and dashed into the living room. Jasper was fine, still curled up in a tight orange ball, but the heavy ceramic lamp on the end table beside him was on the floor, shattered. He must have knocked it over in his sleep. It was a strange coincidence, but that's all it could be, an electronic glitch and a clumsy cat. I swept up the broken pieces, my hands shaking a little. I didn't put the headphones back on for the rest of the day. When I finally did, late that night, the counting had resumed. It didn't start from 1, It started from 281,943, as if the name had been just a small interruption in the sequence. I felt relieved. It was just a fluke, a weird one-time event. The counting continued for another 4 days, steady and relentless. It was nearing 400,000. I began to get used to it again, treating it like background noise, almost like a bizarre white noise machine. On Saturday night, it stopped again. The last number was 388,112. The silence that followed was thick with dread. I knew what was coming. The voice whispered a new name, Mr. Gable. I didn't know anyone named Gable. Then I remembered the elderly man who lived in apartment 4C 2 floors below me. I'd seen his name on the mailbox. I only nodded to him in the hallway. I waited, heart pounding, for something to happen. Nothing did. After a minute, the counting restarted. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, a common name, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The next morning, I saw an ambulance outside my building. I watched from my window as they brought out a body bag. Later, I heard people in the hall talking. It was Mr. Gable. He had a stroke, they said, sometime during the night. That's when the fear really set in. I put the headphones back in their original box and shoved them into the back of my closet behind a stack of old blankets. I couldn't sell them. I couldn't give them away. What if this was real? I couldn't pass that curse on to someone else. But I also couldn't throw them away. I felt a terrifying responsibility for them, for the information they held. My apartment felt loud again. Every creak of the floorboards and every siren in the distance made me jump. I found myself missing the silence those headphones provided, and even the steady rhythm of the count, despite its morbid nature. It became like an addiction. I lasted 3 days. On the third night, I couldn't take the anxiety anymore. I retrieved the box from the closet, hands trembling. I needed to know. I put the headphones on. The count was well over 400,000 now. I sat on my floor in the dark, just listening for what felt like hours. I must have drifted off because I woke up with a start, the leather ear cups cold against my skin. The counting had stopped. I sat up, my body tense with fear. I waited. Then the voice whispered the third name. It was my mother's. I tore the headphones from my head and threw them across the room. They hit the wall with a hollow crack. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I called her. It was almost 3 in the morning her time, but I didn't care. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. I asked if she was okay, my voice frantic. She sounded confused and a little annoyed. She was fine, she said. She was in bed. I told her I'd probably just had a nightmare and to go back to sleep. I stayed on the phone with her for 20 minutes, making excuses just to hear her voice. Before we hung up, she mentioned something casually. She had gotten up for a glass of water an hour earlier and slipped on a small puddle by the sink. She caught herself on the counter, she said. Just a little stumble. No big deal. After that call, I knew I had to destroy the headphones. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a prediction. It felt like a cause, as if the counting was a timer winding down to a specific event and the name was the target. The next morning, I took the headphones out to the small concrete patio behind my building. I laid them on the ground. They looked so ordinary, so harmless. I went back inside and got a hammer from my toolbox. My heart raced against my ribs. I stood over them for a full minute, the weight of the hammer feeling enormous in my hand. Then I brought it down. The first blow cracked the plastic headband. I hit them again and again, shattering the ear cups and breaking the delicate electronics inside into smaller pieces. I gasped for breath, sweat stinging my eyes. I didn't stop until they were just a pile of black and silver debris. As I stood there, catching my breath, I realized something. I could still hear it. The counting. It didn't come from the wreckage on the ground. It came from inside my own head. It was quiet, just as faint as it had been in the headphones, but it was there. And it was getting louder. It didn't stop. It hasn't stopped. In the weeks since I destroyed the headphones, the voice has become a constant part of my life. It's no longer in one ear, it's everywhere, a constant whisper at the edge of my hearing. In a silent room, it's almost deafening. The counting has surpassed 700,000 now. I never know when it's going to stop. I live in a state of endless, agonizing suspense, waiting for the next name, waiting for the silence that comes before the whisper. I try to stay busy, to fill my life with noise, but nothing drowns it out. It's always there, a countdown without an end. Sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet, I find myself counting along with it. 784,212. 784,213. I don't know what happens when it stops. I don't know whose name it will say. But what I fear most, what keeps me awake night after night, is the thought that one day, after some impossibly high number, it will stop for the final time. And the last name it whispers will be my own. I've always appreciated the clarity of a map. A map is a promise. It shows that the messy, wild world can be understood, measured, and organized within neat lines and symbols. For a cartographer, the map isn't just a picture of the land. In a way, it feels more real. I was working a contract for the Forest Service, a 6-week project updating survey data for a remote part of the Greenwater Preserve. It was supposed to be straightforward work. I'd hike the old property lines, check the coordinates with my GPS, and digitize the fatting paper maps from the county archive. But the forest had its own version of the land, and the lines it drew weren't on any map I'd ever encountered. It started with what was missing. My base was a small, one-room cabin provided by the service, located at the end of a gravel road that washed out during heavy rain. Each morning I'd pack my gear, a high-precision GPS rover, a rugged tablet, water, and a compass as backup. My task during the first week was to survey the preserve's western boundary. The old 1940s survey maps showed a few homesteads in the area, small plots of private land that had long been bought up and absorbed into the park. On my third day, I was looking for the remnants of a place marked as the Miller Cabin. I found the location easily enough. My GPS chimed, indicating I was standing right where the cabin should be, but there was nothing there. Not a single stone from a foundation, not a pile of rotted wood, not even a rusty nail. The forest had completely erased it. Huge, ancient hemlocks stood where a front porch might have been. A thick carpet of moss and ferns covered the ground. It felt as if the cabin had never existed at all. This wasn't unusual. The woods are patient and they always win. I logged the coordinates, made a note in my digital file, structure absent, no remains found, and continued my survey. That night back in my cabin, I was sorting through the day's data. The scent of pine and damp earth clung to my clothes. I overlaid my route from the day onto the digitized version of the old paper map. As I cleaned up the file, I noticed something that made me stop. A new feature had appeared on my map. It was a faint dotted line like the kind used to show a footpath, starting at the exact coordinates of the missing Miller cabin and leading north, deeper into an unsurveyed part of the forest. I hadn't drawn it. I stared at it, puzzled. I thought it was a software glitch, a stray line created by a corrupted import of the old map. I selected the path and deleted it. The line vanished. I saved the file, shut down the tablet, and went to bed. The next morning, I booted up the tablet to plan my route. The path was back. Same dotted line, same spot, leading from the phantom cabin into the wilderness. A flicker of annoyance ran through me. These glitches could be frustrating to remove. I deleted it again, more forcefully this time, and ran a diagnostic on the software. It found no errors. I tried to ignore it and focused on my day, surveying a different section of the boundary line. But the thought of the ghost path lingered, a persistent annoyance in my mind. For 2 more days, the pattern continued. Each time I opened the file, the path was there. Each time I deleted it. On the third night, I didn't. I sat there looking at it on the screen, the little line blinking with the cursor. It felt less like a glitch and more like an invitation, a quiet insistence. My logical mind knew it was a bug in the code, but my curiosity was stronger. The next morning, instead of heading to my assigned survey area, I decided to follow the path. I told myself it was a way to troubleshoot the issue, to show that the line on the map didn't correspond to anything on the ground. I hiked to the site of the old Miller cabin and oriented myself. According to the tablet, the path should start right in front of me, heading due north. I looked up. There was no path, just a wall of dense underbrush, tangled rhododendron, and thick stands of young birch. Still, I trusted my instruments. I held up the tablet and started walking, following the blue dot that showed my position as it moved along the dotted line. The hike was tough. I pushed through thick brush, my clothes snagging on thorns, branches whipping at my face. The whole time, the tablet insisted I was on a trail. It was a strange, disorienting experience, with my physical senses telling me one thing while my GPS told me another. After almost an hour, the path on my map simply stopped. It ended in the middle of a small, unnaturally bare clearing, and at the center of that clearing stood a tree. It wasn't on any of the maps, not the old paper ones or the modern satellite images. It was an enormous specimen, a type I didn't recognize. Its bark was smooth and pale, almost white, and it twisted in a way that defied the usual patterns seen in trees, its branches coiling like knotted muscle. There was a deep silence in the clearing, the usual hum of insects and chatter of birds completely missing. I felt a strong, primal sense of unease, the kind of instinct that tells you a predator is near. I took a single photo with my tablet, logged the tree's coordinates, and turned around, leaving much faster than I had arrived. I didn't check the tablet again until I was safely back in my cabin with the door bolted. My hands trembled slightly as I set it on the table. I opened the map file. The tree was there now, a new point I had just added, but there was something else. A new symbol appeared next to it, one I had never seen before. It wasn't a standard cartographic icon. It looked like a circle with a vertical line drawn through it, and my blood turned cold when I saw the other new feature. A second dotted path had appeared. This one started at the strange pale tree and ended directly on top of the icon for my cabin. I felt a wave of panic. This wasn't a glitch. This was something else, something active. I tried to delete the new path, but it wouldn't select. I tried to remove the symbol by the tree. The software wouldn't let me. It was as if these new features had become a permanent part of the map's code, locked in place. I rebooted the tablet, hoping it would clear the error. When the map reloaded, the path was still there. But the strange symbol was no longer next to the tree. It had moved. It was now about a quarter of the way down the path, heading in my direction. I started to laugh, a thin, high sound that did nothing to relieve the pressure in my chest. It was absurd. A symbol was moving on my map. Was I losing my mind? I told myself it had to be a new kind of software bug, maybe a corrupted GPS signal creating a false data point. I put the tablet face down on the table and tried to read a book, forcing my mind onto something normal. Later that night, I was woken by a smell. It was a heavy, earthy scent, like freshly turned dirt, and something sweet and rotten, like decaying leaves. It seemed to seep in from under the cabin door. I lay there, frozen, listening. Then I heard a sound, a soft, wet scraping against the outside wall of the cabin. It was slow and deliberate. It would scrape for a few feet, then stop, then start again, moving along the perimeter. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I couldn't bring myself to look out the window. I reached for the tablet, my hand trembling so much I could barely unlock the screen. I opened the map file. The symbol, the circle with the line through it, was no longer on the path. It was sitting right on top of the icon for my cabin. It was here. Whatever it was, the map had guided it here. The scraping stopped directly outside my door. There was a long, deep silence. Then came a sound that wasn't scraping. A splintering crack, the noise of immense, slow pressure being applied to the doorframe. The wood groaned. I understood then. The map had changed from being a record of the world. It had become a bridge. A way for something from that silent clearing to reach the physical space, to find me. The data was a connection, and I was holding the other end. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed my pack, shoving in my compass and the old folded paper maps. I left everything else. The splintering sound from the door was louder now. I didn't look back at the glowing screen of the tablet on the table, a beacon in the darkness. I quietly unlatched the back window, slipped out into the cold night, and ran. I ran without a light, crashing through the forest, trusting the paper map in my pocket and the faint needle of my compass. I put my faith in the physical world, in paper and ink and magnetic north. I stumbled upon an old, overgrown logging road at dawn and followed it for what felt like an eternity. By noon, I reached the main highway. I never went back. I abandoned the contract, the equipment, everything. I sent an email saying I had a family emergency. They never asked questions. It's been years. I live in the city now, surrounded by concrete, steel, and noise. I don't hike anymore. I can't stand to look at a GPS, and I never use the map apps on my phone. Sometimes I feel a creeping paranoia that if I let my location be known, if I allow myself to become a blue dot on a digital screen, I might see a new path appear. A thin, dotted line stretching from a dark, silent forest, reaching across the grid, pointing directly to me. A promise that the territory is never truly contained.